share just a little bit about this because Erik and I have been friends for over 2 decades. So going back to Chicago, he was a school administrator in Chicago while I was teaching in Chicago. And so we didn't know each other very well, but one Sunday, we had this chance encounter that I'll let him share with you about. But just to show how long it's been since I've known Erik, this is my daughter who's about to graduate from Midway High School this year. All right, this is up at an apple picking up in Illinois. So this was just a picture of Erik from a long, long time ago, very different time. But we've had the most amazing educational journey together that wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have had this encounter that I'll let him tell you the story of. But this is us at the Reagan Ranch last year. We got to speak to a bunch of educators in California. Amazing opportunity. This is Westminster Abbey. We were in London. And then this is him presenting in a room in Windsor Castle that was built in 1408. They think that that Shakespeare and Queen Elizabeth were in this room for the first performance of the Merry Wives of Windsor. So certainly what Erik said wasn't that interesting, but it was pretty great. And so I tell you that because we've had this amazing trajectory over the last 2 decades, dreaming about an event like this, that we could elevate the profession to be the amazing thing that it is by highlighting the amazing work that educators do. But Erik, why don't you take a little bit of how this all started?
Yeah, thanks for the one with the Windsor Castle. My wife was there that day with my sister-in-law, and all she could think about was trying to get in to see the king, who was also there that day. And I'm like, you just take that. But I was at church, at a new church, setting like this, similar setting like this, and some of this will be tips for lunch even in our times together. But I saw Jon's brother, who I went to college with. I didn't know Jon. We went to the same college. He graduated a couple years ahead of me. I didn't know Jon other than the fact that he hosted this big, massive WWE WrestleMania event in his apartment in town with like 40 people. And so, that's how I knew Jon Eckert. But then when I was at the new church and the new setting, I saw his brother who's 6'9", can't miss him. And I went up to him and just said, hey, I had moved back from California. It's like, hey, new here, newly married, checking in with him. And he did something amazing that we don't often do. He didn't keep the relationship. He's like, Erik, it's great to see you. We talked and did our pleasantries, but he's like, I'm here visiting my brother. You need to get to know my brother. And so in some of these conversations, and when we look at when I first met Jon, and that was then the opening for hours and hours and hours of conversation, and then events and ideas and all of these types of things. And now Jon is at a place where he puts a little pressure on me where it says, if Erik invites me, I'm going. And in a month, we'll be at UNESCO in Paris doing something else that's really cool. Trying to serve educators, inclusive educators, trying to learn from them and all those types of things. But I think in that story, 2 things. One, especially as we go to lunch, and he's going to share a little bit more about our relationship, but as you go to lunch, see that person that like, hey, I need to check in with that person, or I need to get to know that person, and be bold enough to go make that gap, fill that gap. But then don't control the relationships. Pass friends on, and you watch who becomes friends in that process and in relationships. So, Jon, you can take it from there.
So yeah, Erik has a great talk he does on leadership through friendship. Like, leadership does not have to be lonely. We have amazing friends in the work that we do. And of course, Erik had to make a lot of lonely decisions as a principal and in a lot of the things he had to do. And there are things that you have to make decisions where you feel pretty alone. But when you have friends, it's a lot easier to get through that. Remember, our resilience is dependent on those relationships, and Erik is one of those relationships that I've depended on for a long time. So for over 2 decades, we've been friends, but about 4 or 5 years into our friendship, he got diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is, 2 to 5 years life expectancy on that. And that was 16 years ago. And so it's amazing that he's here. We're always careful to say it's not entirely a miracle because he hasn't been healed yet. We keep praying for that. And he's been on chemotherapy basically for 16 years. And so whenever I feel like complaining about something, I just need to call Erik. And it's like, oh yeah, I don't have anything to complain about. And he doesn't complain. So if you hear that he's having a rough day, you're like, that must be a horrible day, because I think his good day is my bad day. And so it's a huge blessing to have people like Erik in your life. And so I'm going to show you a couple of pictures. They're kind of hard to look at because, this is his world. He let me share this picture. This is what he goes in for regularly. And this next one's really hard to look at. And Sahira was saying, I don't even remember Erik looking like that. This is just last year. But he continues to work connecting networks of people around the world from the hospital. So he'll be hooked up to an IV bag on Zoom. We complain about being on Zoom, and we're not on IV bags. So, but you can see here, that's a worse day than I've ever had. And he's on Zoom with our master students from all over the country, leading that work and pontificating, as Erik will do. So he almost has the pontiff hand there, ready to go. But it's kind of amazing, because when he's really sick, what he wants to talk about, when I call him, I'll ask him, and I have to ask him specifically, what are your numbers? What's the M spike? Because he won't tell you otherwise. He wants to talk about what's going on in schools, because that's the life-giving part of the work. And it's not put on, because when you feel that bad, you're not faking anything. And so my family, my daughters now, they're 18 and 15, and we have a 20-year-old here at Baylor. We've prayed for Erik every night in family worship for 16 years. And so when he comes in, he's like a celebrity at our house, which thankfully, because we get to work at Baylor, he comes in regularly, and we've gotten to do that. But what he does is connect all these people. And a lot of you are probably in the room, whether you know it or not, because of Erik. And so when he's really sick, we convene a group of educators all over the world for a Zoom call to pray for him. And I couldn't get everybody on the same screen. So you'll see this on Zoom. And so this was the time when things were, treatments get tough. And he's always on experimental treatments because he shouldn't be around. He's 11 years past. And so they've tried everything on him. So he just gets a treatment and hopes for another year or two so they can come up with another treatment. So that's what he does. And what's amazing about it, which is completely a curse, but it's been a blessing to us, is he had to step away from leadership of his own school because he didn't have the energy to do it, and he didn't know how long he'd be able to have to do it. But that completely changes his perspective, because Erik and I can both be opinionated. Erik's even more arrogant than I am. And when he got the diagnosis, he had to step back and say, I don't know how long I'm going to be around here to do this. I don't know if I'm going to have the energy to do this. So who do I put together to do the work? And his only filter is who's fun to work with. If you're not fun and Erik stops contacting you, you'll know that he's determined you're not fun. Life's too short to work with people who aren't fun, right? So that's the world that Erik and I have lived in. And so, Erik, do you want to add anything to that? We didn't plan this out. I was like, hey, I just need to know you and know why we do this work.
Well, I think it's even that tips of even lunchtime. I don't like, talking about what I go through, but I'm not afraid to talk about it, right? So if you ask, I'm happy to tell the stories. I'm happy to share the experience. I'm happy to share what I learned. I had treatment on Sunday last week. I have treatment when I go home on Sunday this week, right? So it's the ongoing journey. So if you want to know more about that, but I think the lesson or the encouragement or the tip I'd give you for today and for the future is sit. The person you might see is maybe different than the person who is. And so sit and ask the questions and dig deep, and the curiosity about other people to dig into their lives. Because they may not want to talk to you about something as part of their life, but it's a major and it's a big part of their life in that. Second thing, it's if you're not fun, you don't get invited. But these people, there's a story behind every connection. One of those people is Jenny Brady. I got assigned to sit next to Jenny Brady at a conference 7 years ago, and my world changed after I met Jenny Brady, right? So be open to those relational connections of getting to know each other, but then the random ones of who's this person and why am I here and how come I'm talking to you and how did I get sat next to you? And then watch how your life might be changed because of that person.